Welcome to Black History Talks, the Jazz Cypher Project, a weekly conversation about the Black American cultural heritage of jazz. We hope this project will serve to preserve this important music form and nurture a new vanguard generation of jazz musicians, enthusiasts, and supporters to help carry this cultural legacy forward.
Welcome to Black History Talks, the Jazz Cypher. I am Antoinette Jones, here with my co-host Lafayette Harris, Jr. This week's discussion is about origins. So we decided to look back and present some of the points of origin and cultural influences that brought about jazz. And now, in honor of those who came before us and transmitted and transformed their experience into syncopated rhythms and polyphonic sounds, we speak the word Sankofa, a word from the Twi language of the Akan people of Ghana, meaning go back and get it. And while sharing the whole history is not possible during this session, we can look back at music that came before jazz. And in order to understand what we have and why we need to get it and absolutely hold on to it. History classes teach that that when enslaved Africans were first brought to North America in the 1600s and onward, they were stripped of much of their culture, but held on to remnants of their African traditions, like storytelling griots, arts, and music and dance. This African aesthetic and sound was woven into the work of field songs and Negro spirituals, which enslaved Africans used to express the pain and joy of their lived experience. As we moved forward through history, we see that this music incorporated other traditions as well, but it continued to express the narrative of Black America. This sounds complicated, but we're here with Marshall, Javier, and Lafayette Harris Jr. to talk about this. So Lafayette, can you tell us a little more about how jazz started?
Oh, well, sure. I can tell you a little bit more. It's been around for a good 100 and some years, and it grew out of it couldn't have started anywhere else but America, and the relationship between African enslaved people and the enslavers, and that the Africans brought their spirituality with them. They brought their melodies and their syncopated rhythms and their musical intelligence with them. And here in America, their musical forms evolved from the dynamics of the relationship with the land and the people and the work that they had to do here. And getting musical knowledge from the Europeans was another big element in the creation of jazz. And one of the earliest forms of music that influenced jazz was ragtime music. And that's music that I loved to learn how to play when I was about 13 years old. And so maybe this is a good time I start the slideshow, huh? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Ragtime. Who started this music called ragtime?
Oh man, ragtime actually grew out of a kind of music they actually called coon music, and
Okay.
that was like a popular music that was going on at that time. It really was something that reflected a negative view of Black people and Black culture, but it was very popular at the time.
Okay,
Much
cool.
like some music of today is popular. So
Okay.
I got my. I'll just go ahead and set this up and start sharing. Okay, so you have to let me share.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it ready? You got it hooked
Uh,
up?
I believe you should get, yes.
Yeah, there it is. All right, so we got the, by the way, this is one of the main names of the show. It's the Jazz Cypher. And here we go. So Scott Joplin, here we go. All right.
Nice.
Yep.
So we have Marshall and Javier. Do you have anything that you'd like to bring a question or something you'd like to make a comment about? Or a question for Mr. Harris?
I have a question.
Yes.
How is jazz today different than it was 100 years ago?
Okay, that's a very good question. Yeah, well, significantly, the many elements are the same. We basically use the same instruments, piano. So see, I got my piano here, drum sets, bass, acoustic bass. Those are sort of like the core instruments of what we call the rhythm section. And then people still play the trumpet, people still play the saxophone, people still sing, usually with a microphone. How is it different? Jazz always brings in the elements of what's going on in the music world at the time. I would say that sometimes it gets more complex. So like you're adding different elements that maybe you didn't add 20 years ago. And then we get these periods where, okay, we get complicated, adding lots of elements. And then we say, oh, I'm tired of that. Let's go back to really making it simple. And people might just have a song that only has one chord or a vamp. So it keeps on changing. I guess nowadays, if you listen to some of the current people in jazz, Robert Glasper probably sounds a whole lot different than Thelonious Monk, who was working around in the 40s, 50s, and 1960s.
Marshall, do you have a question?
So for Lafayette Harris, how did you get into playing jazz?
A couple of reasons. One in school, in junior high school, I was in a band. One of the 4 or 5 bands at my junior high school was like a jazz funk band, and my teacher was Mr. Pope, and he played the trumpet. And that was really my first time hearing this kind of music that was a lot of improvising and a lot of soloing with the horns and whatnot. But before that, I'd only heard popular music on the radio. And of course, I'd heard some classical music, mostly on television. I heard a guy on television that came to do a concert in Baltimore. His name was U.B. Blake, and he was a native of Baltimore. And at the time, he was almost 100 years old. And I remember he came on television, he played this piece that you just heard called the Maple Leaf Rag, but he played it his way. And my mind was blown. I had to learn how to play that piece of music. I went down to the library, Enoch Pratt Free Library, and got the sheet music. It was in a book of all ragtime music. It was about this thick. And it was all music written by this guy, Scott Joplin. And I photocopied it Xerox. That was probably called Xerox in those days. Anyway, this is a good way to segue to the next slide, because here's a guy who's playing ragtime, but his way. Okay, check this out. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's still ragtime. Who was that?
That was the great Mr. Jelly Roll Morton.
Jelly Roll Morton.
He called himself the inventor of jazz. He was a braggadocious kind of guy, you know. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Definitely, he was like the I don't know, the Biggie Smalls of jazz, yeah, maybe back then.
He had a lot of, he wasn't just a musician. He called the people of that period. There was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of vice. You know what vice is, right? He was what they call a pimp. He was a kind of an entrepreneur, you know, being involved in businesses and clubs and things. And yeah, he was kind of a very dynamic personality as well. Mm-hmm. And that piece was recorded by the Library of Congress in 1938. So if you go to the Library of Congress, they have this big collection of him sitting down and playing at, you know, 50-some years old, and it was really fabulous.
Yeah, I think he wrote over 100 pieces, 2 operas and 1 ballet.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. Javier, do you have another question about jazz that you wanted to ask?
What is your favorite jazz artist? Who is?
Is that for me or Antoinette?
Either one.
Antoinette?
My favorite artist is coming up very soon. Her name is Ella Fitzgerald. I recognize her voice whenever I hear it. You recognize Ella just like you recognize Sarah Vaughan and Billie Holiday. Probably Billie Holiday. I recognize her more than Sarah Vaughan, but Ella Fitzgerald is one that I definitely recognize. But I have a question for Lafayette. Can you tell us what makes jazz so unique?
What makes it so unique? Oh, wow. Those American elements. And when I say American, I mean contributions of everyone. The enslaved Africans, people from the Caribbean. I don't think there was much Native American influence. Of course, European influence, and the different parts of Europe, Spanish, that was a big part of it as well, but became a melting pot. But you know the word synergy. It's like when two kind of very different elements come together, and they create something that's like kind of greater than each one by itself. So jazz is a synergy of all those influences. What made it unique? So we never had. There was never a music that had that kind of swing, that kind of utilizing the European instruments in the way that improvising, but in this new American field feeling. The feeling was much more different than anything that happened before. Now this next slide will give you a demonstration of it. Why don't you check it out?
You're going to share your screen with us, right?
Share a screen. There's a green button that says do it. And there we go. Yep. Get that.
A tisket, a tasket, a brown and yellow basket. I send a letter to my mommy. On the way I dropped it. I dropped it, I dropped it. Yes, on the way I dropped it. A little girlie picked it up and put it in her pocket. She was trucking on down the avenue, but not a single thing to do. She went pecking all around. When she spied it on the ground, she took it, my little yellow basket. And if she doesn't bring it back, I think that I will die.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Ella.
That is Ella. That was Ella. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you know Ella, do you know how she became famous?
Oh, who knows that?
Does anyone know? Do you know the Apollo Theater?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people sing at the Apollo Theater. Well, Ella Fitzgerald was 15 years old, and she went to the Apollo Theater to join the competition, and she was going to dance. But there was a group of dancers on before her, tap dancers, the Edwards sisters, and she decided they were so good. They got a standing ovation, I think. She decided, okay, I can't dance. I'm not that good. What am I going to do? She sang. She sang 2 songs, Judy, that was written by Hoagie Carmichael, and Object of My Affection by Pinky Tomlin and Jimmy Greer. And she won. She won the entire thing just on a whim, switch up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's amazing.
It's about jazz is you got to be able to go with the flow, because when the audience saw this amazing dance performance and they knew that this other person was coming out to dance, and she came on stage, and people just looked at her and say, "What's she gonna do?" So that was it. You got to really be on your toes and be ready to pivot to something else.
That's right. And she recorded A Tisket, a Tasket, co-wrote and recorded it 4 years later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so amazing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think I have one more question. There's another element of jazz, and Robert Johnson has contributed a lot. It has a different sound. We heard Joplin, and I thought, sorry, I misspoke. It was Joplin who wrote those 100 pieces and the operas and the ballet. But we heard the switch from the feel of Joplin to Jelly Roll Morton, who really started it swinging. Jelly Roll started writing arrangements down before artists had it in their head. But Robert Johnson contributed something from a slightly different space. Can you tell us about him?
Sure. Let's see, Robert Johnson. I'll I'll share the screen so you can see his photo. Was quite a different kind of musician than Joplin or Jelly Roll Morton. These bluesmen. He was what they call a bluesman, and they played on the corner. Wow, they were even doing that in New York when I first got here in 1985, and playing in juke joints, which is just pubs that be out in the woods, and they'd sell alcoholic beverages and just have a good time and kind of get away from the stress of life. And these singers musicians would be singing songs that reflected whatever was going on in their life, love, family life, and one particular aspect of life you're talking about, that's the lynching period, big lynching period, and blacks could be lynched for any reason, and they didn't have the power to say, "Hey, don't do that," you know, and to go down to the police station and complain. There was not, they didn't have that much power to be able to do that, but they could sing about it in a song, and they did that with the blues, and they also did that with gospel music. Here's a song that written by Robert Johnson. This is a recording in 1937, about a year before he died. He was active from about 1929 until 1938, and he was only 27 years old when he passed away. Here we go.
I got to keep moving, I got to keep moving. Blood falling down like hail, blood falling down like hail. Blood falling down like hail, blood falling down like hail. And the day keeps on running me. It's a hellhound on my trail, hellhound on my trail, hellhound on my trail.
Yeah, yeah, that's a pretty interesting kind of sound he had.
So I guess that interesting sound, the blues, the field songs, spirituals, all working together with African aesthetics, the African drums that come with the enslaved people, all of those things contributed to jazz. And I would like to ask the young people, why do you think so?
I think Julian might be coming in. I just got a message from him.
Okay, we're running out of time. Could we ask the question to the young people?
Yeah, and then I just saw that we also got extended as well.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, we can always re-ask it. Yeah, but yes.
So Lafayette, if you wouldn't mind if you would ask the question.
Why do you youngsters think that more young people don't listen to jazz?
I guess I could answer them first.
Sure.
So I feel like jazz as a genre of music isn't the same as it was before in the past. I think it was in the 40s and the 50s and maybe the 60s. It was more popular, and it's because it was more of a dance style of music. And over time, it's become more academic almost, where the majority of people who get into jazz kind of have to get into it by through learning about it, through education and playing an instrument. While in the 40s, it was just stuff you heard in the clubs and even on the radio. And now, like, all the people who I know play jazz and listen to jazz are people who study music and study jazz. So I think that contributes to it a lot.
I guess
I
we
agree.
didn't have... Oh yeah, go ahead.
I agree. I think it's also because nowadays there's a lot of like social media and stuff like that that really kind of decides what the popular music is going to be. So since jazz isn't really in the mainstream media as like the most popular form of music, then not many kids are going to listen to it or think about it or study it or anything like that.
Yeah. And I think that since it's been around for so long, it kind of just, it kind of had its shot, and then it really, lots of different types of music started to come around in American culture, and just kind of fell behind. But it does, even today, it's still evolving and still has a big following, and it's even almost fusing with some of those elements of other music that came after it. Like there's a lot of hip hop and jazz fusion music going on right now, like Robert Glasper and Kamasi Washington, and a lot of new musicians. So it's definitely still evolving, but I'd still say that it definitely is not as popular as it was before, and it's basically because it is more of an academic type of music, and it's I guess harder to get into.
That's a good point. Julian, welcome. Do you could have a last comment for this question or response to it? Why do so few young people listen to jazz? Welcome, Julian Thompson.
I don't really know, to be honest. It just seems like anything else, music evolves based on popular culture, and that's just not where it is right now. So there's still some influence, obviously, but not enough to actually call it jazz.
Mr. Harris, do you have a final comment for us?
Well, I am glad that we are here together. Making the connection with young people is something that I always love to do and looking forward to doing more of, and having these kinds of discussions about what's going on in our world and how our art forms can be preserved is just something I think is vital to our well-being now and for our future.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we're just about out of time, so I'll close this out. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to continuing this conversation next week when we will explore a little bit about jazz and its connection to hip hop and rap. We'll see where it falls in contemporary music today. We are your co-hosts, Antoinette Jones and Lafayette Harris, and we look forward to seeing you next time for another session of Black History Talks, the Jazz Cypher Project. Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.